The telegram arrived at the mission house just as Adelaide Brennan was teaching 3 Kiowa children their letters, and when she read the words scrawled in desperate haste, she understood immediately why the request had traveled 300 miles to find her in the spring of 1878. The message was simple and stark. A cattle ranch outside Kingfisher, Oklahoma Territory, needed a teacher for the rancher's young sister, who had survived a terrible fever that left her unable to speak or hear properly. The request had gone to the mission board in St. Louis, then to 3 different teachers closer to Kingfisher, and all had refused. The location was too remote, the situation too difficult, the pay too uncertain. Adelaide read between the lines of what the mission director told her that evening over weak coffee and hard bread. No one else would go. She was 22 years old, plain-faced with serious gray eyes and brown hair she kept in a tight bun, and she had spent the last 4 years working among people that society deemed unreachable. The mission director, a weathered woman named Mrs. Caldwell, watched her carefully as Adelaide set down the telegram. "You understand what this means," Mrs. Caldwell said. "Kingfisher is rough country. The town barely exists. This ranch is apparently several miles outside even that. You would be alone there with strangers, and the work would be challenging at best. But the child needs help," Adelaide said quietly. "And I have experience with students who require patience and different teaching methods." Mrs. Caldwell sighed. "The others refused because of the conditions, Adelaide. The rancher, a man named Yates Kincaid, apparently has a reputation for being difficult, hard, some say mean-spirited, though the telegram certainly seemed desperate enough." Adelaide folded the telegram carefully. "If he cares enough about his sister to seek help this persistently, he cannot be entirely without compassion. Or he simply wants the burden lifted from his shoulders," Mrs. Caldwell replied, but her tone was gentle. "I am not forbidding you to go. I simply want you to understand fully what you are choosing." That night, Adelaide packed her few belongings into a battered trunk. She owned 4 dresses, all practical cotton in shades of gray and brown. She had her teaching materials, her Bible, a few precious books, and the silver locket that had belonged to her mother. By dawn, she was on a stage heading west. The journey took 5 days of bone-jarring travel across increasingly empty landscape. The other passengers changed at each stop, but Adelaide remained, watching the land transform from settled farms to open prairie. By the time the stage pulled into Kingfisher, she was covered in dust and exhausted to her bones. Kingfisher was hardly a town at all, just a collection of rough buildings clustered along a muddy street. There was a general store, a saloon, a livery, and perhaps a dozen other structures that looked thrown together with whatever materials had been available. The stage driver helped her down and set her trunk in the dirt. "Someone meeting you, miss?" he asked, eyeing the empty street. "I believe so," Adelaide said, though she had no confirmation of that. The telegram had simply said to come. The driver looked doubtful but tipped his hat and climbed back up. The stage rolled away, leaving her standing alone with her trunk as the sun beat down mercilessly. She was considering her options when she heard the sound of hooves and turned to see a rider approaching. The man on the horse was tall and lean, dressed in worn work clothes and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned dark from the sun, angular and hard, with eyes the color of whiskey that assessed her with obvious skepticism. He reined in his horse a few feet away and sat looking down at her for a long moment. "You the teacher?" His voice was rough, unused to unnecessary words. "I am Adelaide Brennan," she said, straightening her shoulders despite her fatigue. "From the Mission Inn. I know where you came from." He swung down from the horse with easy grace. I am Yates Kincaid. Did not expect them to actually send anyone, let alone. He trailed off, but Adelaide could fill in the rest. Let alone someone like her, plain and young and clearly inexperienced in the ways of ranching country. She lifted her chin. I have experience teaching children with difficulties in learning and communication, she said firmly. The mission director thought I would be well suited to help your sister. Something shifted in his expression, too quick to raid. He moved to pick up her trunk, lifting it as though it weighed nothing. Horse can carry this. You will have to ride with me. Adelaide had never ridden a horse in her life, but she was not about to admit that. Of course. He secured the trunk, then turned back to her. For a moment he just looked at her, and she had the unsettling feeling he could see right through her brave front. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened just slightly. Takes courage to come out here alone, he said quietly. Especially when you knew others had refused. Bravery brought you to me, I suppose, though I do not know if that is a blessing or a curse for you yet. Before she could respond, he held out his hand to help her mount. His grip was strong and calloused, and he lifted her onto the horse before swinging up behind her. Adelaide stiffened, acutely aware of his presence, the solid warmth of him at her back. Hold on, he said, and then they were moving. The ride to the ranch took nearly 2 hours. The land rolled out endlessly around them, grass and sky meeting at a horizon so distant it made Adelaide feel both small and strangely free. Yates did not speak, but his silence was not hostile, merely habitual. Adelaide found herself relaxing slightly, adjusting to the rhythm of the horse's gait. Finally, they crested a rise and she saw the ranch spread out below. It was larger than she had expected, a sturdy house built of wood and stone, a big barn, several outbuildings and corrals where cattle and horses milled about. Smoke rose from the chimney and she could see men working near the barn. It is a good ranch, she said, surprised into speaking. It is mine, Yates said simply, and she heard the pride beneath the words. Built it from nothing over the last 8 years. It has cost me everything I had and more, but it will last. He guided the horse down toward the house, and Adelaide saw a figure appear in the doorway. A girl, small and thin, with long dark hair that hung loose down her back. She looked to be perhaps 13 or 14, and when she saw them approaching, her face lit up with an expression of such pure hope that Adelaide felt her heart constrict. Yates dismounted and reached up to help Adelaide down. Her legs were unsteady after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand steadied her, lingering for just a moment before he stepped back. That is Sarah, he said, his voice gentling in a way Adelaide had not yet heard. She is 15, though she looks younger. The fever took her 2 years ago. She can hear a little if you speak very loudly, but mostly she relies on watching faces, gestures. She cannot speak at all anymore. The girl, Sarah, had approached slowly, her dark eyes moving between her brother and Adelaide with cautious curiosity. Adelaide smiled at her, then slowly, carefully gestured to herself. Adelaide, she said clearly, pointing to herself. Then she pointed to Sarah with a questioning expression. Sarah's face brightened. She pointed to herself and mouthed Sarah, though no sound came out. Then she did something that surprised Adelaide. She made a series of quick gestures with her hands, her expression questioning. She learned some signs from a man who came through last year, Yates explained. Deaf fellow who worked cattle for a few months. He taught her maybe 20 words before he moved on. She has been trying to learn more on her own, but without anyone to practice with. Adelaide felt excitement rise in her chest. I know some sign language, she said. Not much, but I worked with a deaf student for a year. I can learn more and I can teach Sarah. For the first time, Yates Kincaid smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and bringing warmth to his eyes. "That would be more than I hoped for when I sent that telegram," he said. Sarah was watching them intently, clearly trying to follow the conversation. Adelaide turned to her and signed slowly, carefully, one of the simple phrases she knew. "I am happy to meet you." Sarah's eyes went wide. She responded with a flurry of signs, too fast for Adelaide to follow, her face alight with joy. Yates reached out and gently caught his sister's hands, slowing her down with obvious affection. "She is excited," he said unnecessarily. "She has been alone too long." Adelaide looked at him and saw the guilt and pain in his expression, quickly hidden. She understood then that this hard, silent man loved his sister deeply and blamed himself for not being able to help her. "We will work together," Adelaide said firmly. "Sarah is bright. I can see that already. She will learn quickly." That first evening was a revelation of the life she had entered. The ranch house was simple but well built, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living space, and 3 small bedrooms off a narrow hallway. Sarah's room was neat and spare, with a bed, a washstand, and shelves holding a few precious books and a collection of pretty rocks. Adelaide was given the room next to Sarah's, barely large enough for a bed and a small trunk, but private and clean. Yates lived in the 3rd bedroom, and Adelaide tried not to think about the fact that she would be sleeping just down a narrow hallway from him. There was also an older man named Bill who served as foreman and cook, and 3 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. Bill was grizzled and weathered, with kind eyes and a dry sense of humor that showed itself over the simple dinner he prepared. "About time someone came to help the girl," Bill said as he served Adelaide a plate of beef and beans. "Yates has been tearing his hair out trying to figure how to reach her." Yates shot him a look, but did not contradict him. Sarah sat beside Adelaide, eating with careful manners, her eyes constantly moving between the adults as she tried to follow the conversation. After dinner, Adelaide spent time with Sarah, using a combination of simple signs, written words, and gestures to begin building a bridge of communication. Sarah was indeed bright, hungry for learning and connection. Within an hour they had established several new signs and Sarah was beaming with happiness. Yates watched from across the room, ostensibly reading a newspaper, but Adelaide could feel his attention on them. When she finally declared it time for bed, he looked up. "Thank you," he said simply. "I have not seen her this happy in 2 years." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest. "She is a joy to teach. We will make good progress, I think." That night, lying in the narrow bed in the small room, Adelaide listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. She heard the wind moving across the prairie, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of wood adjusting to the cooler night air. She thought about Sarah's eager face, about Yates's unexpected gentleness with his sister, about the way his eyes had warmed when he smiled. She had come here because no one else would, driven by duty and compassion. But lying there in the darkness, she felt the first stirring of something else, something that felt dangerously like belonging. The days fell into a rhythm that was both demanding and deeply satisfying. Adelaide woke with the sun and spent the mornings working with Sarah on her lessons. They focused on expanding Sarah's vocabulary of signs, but also on reading and writing, mathematics, and geography. Sarah proved to be a voracious learner, soaking up knowledge like parched earth soaks up rain. In the afternoons, when the heat was most intense, Adelaide would rest in her room or help Bill with small tasks around the house. She learned to make bread, to churn butter, to mend clothes with neat, efficient stitches. Bill appreciated the help and showed his gratitude by teaching her about ranch life. explaining the rhythms and demands of cattle ranching in a way that helped her understand the world she now inhabited. Yates was often gone during the day, working with the cattle or riding the boundaries of his land. But in the evenings, he would return dusty and tired, and after cleaning up, he would join Adelaide and Sarah for dinner. Slowly, hesitantly, he began to learn signs as well. It was awkward at first. His hands, so capable with a rope or a horse, struggled with the precise movements. But he persisted with a determination that Adelaide found touching. Sarah would giggle silently at his mistakes, her eyes dancing with amusement, and he would make exaggerated expressions of frustration that made her giggle more. These moments, with the three of them gathered around the table in the lamplight, became precious to Adelaide. She saw a side of Yates that the rest of the world never glimpsed. He was patient with Sarah, playful even, willing to make a fool of himself if it made her happy. And sometimes, when Sarah was not looking, Adelaide would catch him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Sarah went to bed early, tired from a long day of lessons. Adelaide was cleaning up the dinner dishes when Yates spoke from behind her. "You have given her back to herself," he said quietly. "I do not know how to thank you for that." Adelaide turned, her hands still damp from the dishwater. "You do not need to thank me. Teaching Sarah is a privilege, not a burden." He stepped closer, and in the lamplight his face was softer than she had ever seen it. "When I sent that telegram, I did not really believe anyone would come. This place is too rough, too isolated. I thought I would get polite refusals and then I would have to accept that Sarah would grow up alone, trapped in silence. But I did come," Adelaide said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did." His eyes held hers, even knowing that others had refused. "Bill asked me why I thought you came when everyone else said no. I told him you must be either very brave or very foolish." Adelaide felt a flicker of indignation. "And which do you think I am?" "Brave," he said immediately. "The bravest person I have met." "You came because it was right, because a girl needed help. Not many people make choices based on what is right anymore." The intensity in his gaze made her heart beat faster. She turned back to the dishes, needing to break the moment. "I am not brave. I simply did what anyone with compassion would do." "No." His voice was firm. "You did what almost everyone refused to do. That is the definition of bravery." She felt him move closer, and then his hand was on her shoulder, gentle but unmistakable. Adelaide froze, acutely aware of the warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of her dress. "Adelaide," he said, and her name in his rough voice sent shivers down her spine. "I want you to know that you are safe here. You are valued. Whatever you need, you only have to ask." She turned to face him and found him closer than she had realized. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to smell the clean scent of soap and leather and something uniquely him. "Thank you," she managed. "That means a great deal to me." For a long moment they stood there, the air between them charged with something new and fragile. Then Yates stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should check on the horses," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Good night, Adelaide." "Good night," she whispered, and watched him walk out into the darkness. That night, Adelaide lay awake for a long time, her hand pressed to her shoulder where she could still feel the warmth of his touch. She told herself she was being foolish, that she was reading too much into a simple gesture of gratitude, but her heart would not listen to reason. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Adelaide was working with Sarah on the porch, enjoying the relative cool of the early hours when 4 riders appeared on the horizon. She felt tension instantly coil in her stomach. In her weeks at the ranch, no one had visited, and she had learned that in this country, unexpected visitors could mean trouble. Yates emerged from the barn, moving with deceptive casualness toward the house. Bill and the ranch hands also appeared, positioning themselves strategically. Adelaide gathered Sarah close, ready to move inside if needed. But as the riders drew closer, Yates relaxed slightly. "It is Tom Harrison and some of his men," he said to Adelaide. "Neighboring rancher, not a friend but not an enemy either." The riders pulled up in front of the house, and the lead man, a burly figure with a graying beard, tipped his hat. "Kincaid," he said by way of greeting. "Harrison." Yates's voice was neutral. "What brings you out this way?" "Heard you got yourself a teacher for the girl," Harrison said, his eyes moving to Adelaide with open curiosity. "Wanted to see if it was true. Nobody thought anyone would actually come out to this God-forsaken place." Adelaide felt a flash of annoyance at his dismissive tone, but Yates spoke before she could. "Miss Brennan has been kind enough to help my sister," he said, an edge in his voice. "She is worth 10 of the fancy teachers who refused." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Touchy, are we?" "I meant no offense, miss. Just surprised is all. This is rough country for a lady." "I am finding it suits me quite well," Adelaide said coolly. She felt Sarah press closer to her side and put a comforting arm around the girl's shoulders. One of Harrison's men spoke up, a younger fellow with a mean look about him. "Awful young to be living out here alone with a man, is not she? What would people say?" The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Yates moved with startling speed, positioning himself between Adelaide and the riders. "You will watch your mouth, or you will leave my property with my boot print on your backside," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Harrison held up a hand. "Easy, Kincaid. Jake does not know how to speak around ladies. We will be going." He paused, then added, "Actually came to warn you. There has been rustling reported north of here. Lost some cattle myself last week. Thought you should know to keep your eyes open." Yates nodded curtly. "Appreciate the warning." Harrison and his men rode off, but the encounter left Adelaide shaken. She had not considered what people might think of her situation, living alone at the ranch with Yates. In the town she had come from, the mission had provided clear propriety and protection. Here, things were different. That evening, after Sarah was in bed, Yates brought up the subject himself. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and gold across the prairie. "I have been thinking about what Harrison's man said," Yates began, his voice troubled. "I do not want your reputation damaged by being here." Adelaide felt her heart sink. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No." He turned to her, his expression almost panicked. "No, not at all. Sarah needs you. I want you to know that I would never do anything to compromise you. You are completely safe here in every way." "I know that," Adelaide said softly. "I have never felt unsafe with you, Yates." He looked at her for a long moment. "You trust me." "I do." "Why?" The question seemed torn from him. "You do not really know me. You do not know the things I have done, the mistakes I have made." Adelaide considered her answer carefully. "I know that you love your sister enough to keep searching for help when everyone else would have given up. I know that you work harder than any man I have ever seen to build something lasting. I know that you treat me with respect and kindness. That is enough." Yates reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "You humble me," he said quietly. "You came here out of pure goodness, and I am just a rough cattleman with more debts than dollars and a past I am not proud of." "Tell me about your past," Adelaide said impulsively. "If you want to." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice low and rough with old pain. "My parents died when I was 18 and Sarah was just a baby. Cholera took them both within a week. I had been working as a ranch hand, learning the trade, but suddenly I had an infant sister to care for and no money to speak of. I did things I am not proud of to keep us fed. Gambled, ran with some rough men, bent the law when I thought I could get away with it." He paused, his jaw tight. "Then one night, the men I was running with decided to rob a bank. I did not know that was the plan until we were riding into town. I backed out, told them I wanted no part of it. They called me a coward and worse, but I left. They went ahead without me, and 2 of them died in the robbery. The others ended up in prison." Adelaide squeezed his hand, saying nothing, just listening. "That was my wake-up call," Yates continued. "I took Sarah and headed to Oklahoma Territory, started working as a ranch hand again, saved every penny I could. When this land became available, I bought it with money I had scraped together and a loan from a bank in Guthrie. I have been working to pay off that loan ever since, building this ranch into something I can be proud of, something I can leave to Sarah." "You should be proud," Adelaide said firmly. "You turned your life around. You made good choices when it mattered. That takes strength. You do not judge me for my past. We all have things we regret," Adelaide said. "What matters is who we choose to be now." Yates lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "You are remarkable," he said. "I have never met anyone like you." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. Neither spoke, but the silence was comfortable, charged with a new understanding between them. The next few weeks brought a subtle shift in the dynamic at the ranch. Yates began finding excuses to be near Adelaide during the day. He would join her and Sarah for lessons, ostensibly to practice his signing but really just to be in her presence. He taught Adelaide to ride, patiently showing her how to handle a gentle mare named Daisy. Their hands would brush as he helped her mount, and she would feel electricity spark between them. Sarah noticed, of course. She was young but not blind, and she began giving her brother knowing looks and making teasing gestures that made him flush and Adelaide laugh. The girl was clearly delighted at the growing closeness between the 2 most important people in her world. One afternoon, Yates asked Adelaide if she would ride out with him to check on cattle in the north pasture. Sarah was visiting with Bill, helping him make apple pie, so Adelaide agreed. They rode out across the prairie, side by side, talking easily about everything and nothing. Yates told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build a bigger house someday, about hoping to bring in better breeding stock to improve his herd. Adelaide talked about her childhood, about losing her parents to influenza when she was 16, about finding purpose in teaching at the mission. "You miss it?" Yates asked. "The mission, your life before?" Adelaide considered the question honestly. "I miss some of the people. Mrs. Caldwell was kind to me and I had friends among the other teachers, but I do not miss the work as much as I thought I would." "Why not?" "Because here with Sarah, I can see the direct impact of my teaching. She is growing and learning and becoming herself again. That is more rewarding than anything I did before." She paused, then added softly, "And I have other reasons to be happy here." Yates reined in his horse, and Adelaide stopped beside him. They were on a rise overlooking a small creek, cottonwood trees providing shade along the banks. He dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Adelaide," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something." Her heart was pounding. "What is it?" "I have fallen in love with you." The words came out in a rush, as though he had been holding them back for too long. "I know I have no right, that you came here to teach Sarah, not to be courted by a rough cattleman with more ambition than sense. But I cannot keep it to myself anymore. You are in my thoughts every moment. You have brought light to this place, to my life, to me, and I am in love with you." Adelaide felt joy bloom in her chest, so intense it almost hurt. "Yates, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted. I will not press you, I just needed you to know. Yates, she said again, more firmly. Let me speak. He fell silent, his eyes searching hers with desperate hope. I love you too, Adelaide said, and watched his expression transform. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you said bravery brought me to you. You are good and honorable and kind, and you have shown me what it means to build a life with purpose. I love you. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing her. His lips were gentle at first, tentative, as though he feared she might pull away. But when Adelaide wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the feeling in her heart, he deepened the kiss, pulling her close against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast. I know you deserve a proper courtship, but Adelaide, please marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "Yes," Adelaide said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." They stayed there by the creek for hours, talking and kissing and making plans. Yates told her he would pay off the bank loan within the year if the cattle sales went well. He wanted to add rooms to the house, to build something worthy of a family. Adelaide told him she did not need a grand house, that she would be happy anywhere as long as they were together. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Sarah took one look at their faces and began signing excitedly, asking questions so fast that Adelaide could barely follow. When they told her they were going to be married, Sarah threw her arms around both of them, her joy radiating from every line of her body. Bill just grinned and said it was about time, then announced he was making a special dinner to celebrate. The ranch hands offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. That night felt magical, full of happiness and promise, but the magic was short-lived. 2 days later, Yates and his men discovered that someone had cut the fence on the north boundary, and nearly 50 head of cattle were missing. The rustlers Harrison had warned about had struck. Yates was grim-faced as he prepared to ride out with his men to try to track the stolen cattle. "I have to go," he told Adelaide. "Those cattle represent a significant portion of my herd. If I cannot get them back, it could mean the difference between paying off the loan this year or going deeper into debt." "I understand," Adelaide said, though fear clutched at her heart. "Please be careful." He pulled her close, kissing her hard. "I will come back to you," he promised. "We have a wedding to plan, and I am not missing that for anything." He and the men rode out within the hour. Bill stayed behind to watch over the ranch, along with the youngest hand, a boy of 18 named Danny. Adelaide tried to keep things normal for Sarah, maintaining their lesson schedule and daily routines, but she could not hide her worry entirely. 3 days passed with no word. On the 4th day, a rider appeared, but it was not Yates. It was Tom Harrison, and his face was grave. "There has been trouble," Harrison said without preamble. "Kincaid and his men caught up with the rustlers. There was a fight. Kincaid was shot." Adelaide felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Is he alive?" "He was when my men found them yesterday. They were camped about 20 miles north of here. The rustlers got away, but Kincaid got his cattle back. He is hurt bad, though. My men are bringing him back now. Should be here within a few hours." The next few hours were the longest of Adelaide's life. She prepared Yates's room as best she could, tearing up clean sheets for bandages, boiling water, gathering what medical supplies the ranch possessed. Sarah watched with wide, frightened eyes, and Adelaide tried to project a calm she did not feel. When they finally arrived, Yates was unconscious, draped across his horse and held in place by one of Harrison's men. Adelaide's breath caught at the sight of him, so pale and still. They carried him into the house and laid him on his bed. The bullet wound was in his left shoulder, and he had lost a significant amount of blood. Adelaide sent Danny to town to fetch the doctor, though she knew it would be hours before he could arrive if he came at all. In the meantime, she did what she could. She cleaned the wound, relieved to find that the bullet had passed through and did not need to be dug out. She bandaged it carefully, changed the blood-soaked dressings, and tried to get water between Yates's lips. Bill helped her, his weathered face drawn with worry. "He is a strong one," Bill said. "If anyone can pull through this, it is Yates." Sarah hovered in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Adelaide pulled her close. "He is going to be all right," she said, signing the words as she spoke. "Your brother is a fighter. He will not leave us." The doctor finally arrived late that night, a tired man named Dr. Mitchell who had ridden out from Kingfisher. He examined Yates thoroughly, rebandaged the wound with approval for Adelaide's work, and left medicine to help with pain and fever. "He has lost a lot of blood, Doctor," Mitchell said frankly. "But if infection does not set in, he should recover. You did good work, Miss Brennan. Keep him comfortable and get liquids into him when you can. I will check back in a few days." Adelaide sat with Yates through the night, bathing his fevered skin with cool water, changing dressings, talking to him even though he could not hear her. She told him about her day with Sarah, about the lessons they had done, about the bread that had turned out better than expected. She told him how much she loved him, how she needed him to fight to come back to her. As dawn broke, his fever finally broke as well. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then clearing as they found her face. "Adelaide," he rasped. "I am here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am right here. Did I miss the wedding?" His attempt at humor was so weak it made her laugh and cry at the same time. "Not yet," she said, "but you are not getting out of it that easily." His hand found hers, his grip weak but determined. "Good. Because I plan to marry you the minute I can stand up without falling over." Over the next 2 weeks, Yates slowly regained his strength. Adelaide nursed him with fierce dedication, and Sarah helped by keeping him entertained with stories told in increasingly sophisticated sign language. The ranch hands returned with the recovered cattle, and the herd was whole again. One evening, as Yates sat propped up in bed and Adelaide changed his bandages, he told her what had happened. "We tracked them to a canyon about 30 miles north," he said. 5 men, rough types, well armed. We waited until dawn and then confronted them. I told them to return the cattle and we would let them go. They decided to fight instead." He paused, his jaw tight at the memory. "One of them got off a lucky shot before we drove them off. We got the cattle back, but I have to admit, there was a moment I thought I might not make it home to you." "Do not think about that," Adelaide said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she secured the fresh bandage. "You are here now and you are healing. Thanks to you." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "You saved my life, Adelaide. Dr. Mitchell said if you had not cleaned and dressed the wound so well, infection would have killed me for sure." "Then I suppose we are even," Adelaide said softly. "You saved me too, you know. Before I came here, I was just going through the motions of living. You gave me a reason to truly live, to hope, to love." Yates pulled her down gently until she was sitting on the edge of the bed, and then he kissed her with all the tenderness and passion in his heart. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "Marry me," he said. "Not someday, not when I am fully healed. Marry me as soon as I can stand up long enough to say my vows." Adelaide laughed. "You already proposed, remember? I already said yes." "I know, but I want to make sure you have not changed your mind after seeing what a dangerous fool I can be." "Never," Adelaide said fiercely. "I love you exactly as you are, Yates Kincaid, dangerous fool and all." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Kingfisher. Yates was still recovering, his arm in a sling, but he stood tall and proud as Adelaide walked down the aisle toward him. She wore a simple dress of pale blue that she had sewn herself, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Sarah had gathered that morning. Sarah stood beside Adelaide as her attendant, beaming with joy and signing enthusiastically to anyone who would watch. Bill served as Yates's best man, looking uncomfortable in his clean clothes, but pleased nonetheless. The ranch hands attended, along with a surprising number of people from town and neighboring ranches who had heard about the teacher who came when no one else would, and the rancher who loved her. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Tom Harrison actually stood up. Adelaide's heart stopped, but then Harrison said, "I just want to say that Kincaid is getting the better end of this deal, and he better know how lucky he is." There was laughter, and Yates called back, "I know it, Harrison. Believe me, I know." The vows were simple but heartfelt. When Yates said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure. When Adelaide said the same, she felt as though her heart would burst with happiness. And when the minister pronounced them man and wife, Yates kissed her with such tender passion that several of the ladies sighed romantically. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and enough food to feed an army. Bill had outdone himself with the cooking, and even Harrison's wife had contributed several pies. There was music and dancing, and Adelaide danced with her husband under the stars, feeling more at home than she had ever felt in her life. Later, after the guests had gone and Sarah had been tucked into bed, Yates led Adelaide to the room that was now theirs. He had added a larger bed and new furniture, making it a proper marriage chamber. Adelaide felt suddenly nervous, but Yates was gentle, patient, worshipping her with his hands and lips until her nervousness melted into passion. Their joining was tender and sweet, and afterward, lying in his arms, Adelaide felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. "I love you," Yates murmured into her hair. "Thank you for being brave enough to come here. Thank you for seeing something in me worth loving." "I love you too," Adelaide whispered back. "And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. You are exactly who I was meant to find." The years that followed were not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were lean years when the cattle prices fell or the weather turned harsh. But Yates and Adelaide faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. Sarah continued to flourish under Adelaide's teaching. By the time she was 18, she was fully literate, could manage the ranch books better than anyone, and had developed her own system of signs that incorporated the formal sign language Adelaide had taught her with variations of her own invention. Young men from neighboring ranches began to take notice of the beautiful, intelligent young woman, and eventually, she fell in love with a gentle cowhand named Peter, who learned signing just to court her properly. Adelaide gave birth to their first child 2 years after their wedding, a healthy boy they named William after Bill, who had become like family to them. The old foreman cried openly when they told him, and he proved to be a doting grandfather figure to all the children that followed. 2 years after William came a daughter, Emma, with her father's eyes and her mother's determination. Then another son, James, who was quieter than his siblings but possessed a deep kindness that reminded Adelaide of Yates. And finally, when Adelaide was 32 and Yates 36, twin girls arrived, Lily and Rose, who kept the whole ranch on their toes with their mischievous energy. Yates expanded the house as he had promised, adding rooms and a wide porch where the family would gather in the evenings. He paid off the bank loan and bought more land, building the ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory. But he never forgot where he had come from or what mattered most. Often, Adelaide would find him just watching her and the children with an expression of wonder on his face, as though he could not quite believe his good fortune. And she would go to him and take his hand, reminding him with her touch that this was real, that they had built this life together through love and determination. Sarah married Peter when she was 20, in the same small church where Adelaide and Yates had wed. She moved to a ranch 5 miles away, close enough to visit often but far enough to build her own life. She and Peter had 3 children of their own, and Sarah proved to be as dedicated a mother as she had been a student. On their 10th anniversary, Yates took Adelaide back to the spot by the creek where he had first told her he loved her. The cottonwoods were taller now, the creek still running clear and bright. "You remember this place?" he asked, pulling her close. "How could I forget?" Adelaide said, smiling up at him. "This is where you proposed, where everything began." "I wanted to bring you back here to tell you something," Yates said. "I have been thinking about that first day you arrived, how you stood there in the dust looking so determined and brave. I was sure you would leave within a week, that the reality of ranch life would send you running back to civilization." "I almost did leave," Adelaide admitted. "That first night, lying in that tiny room, I wondered what I had gotten myself into." "What made you stay?" She considered the question. "You did. And Sarah. I saw how much you loved her, how hard you were trying to help her even though you did not know how. I saw the possibility of building something meaningful here, and I suppose I saw in you the man I could love." Yates kissed her softly. "I have never told you this, but that day when I saw you standing there, something in my heart recognized you. I was terrified and drawn to you in equal measure. And when you looked at Sarah with such kindness, such immediate understanding, I think I started falling in love with you right then." "We have built a good life," Adelaide said, looking around at the land that had become home. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "It is not done yet," Yates said with a grin. "I am thinking of expanding into horse breeding, and the children will need schooling beyond what you can teach at home. I am thinking we could build a proper school, hire another teacher to help you, open it to children from the surrounding ranches." Adelaide laughed. "Always planning, always building. What would you do if you ever ran out of dreams to chase?" "Find new ones with you," Yates said simply. "That is what life is about, is not it? Building dreams together." They did build the school, a sturdy structure that went up the following year on the edge of their property. Adelaide taught there 3 days a week, with help from a young woman named Miss Cooper who came from Kansas. Children from ranches within a 20-mile radius attended, and the school became a center of community life. As the children grew, each found their own path. William took to ranching like he was born to it, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Emma proved to have a talent for medicine and went back east to study nursing, though she returned home regularly and eventually established a small clinic in Kingfisher. James surprised everyone by showing a gift for teaching, and he worked at the school with his mother, his gentle patience perfect for working with the younger children. The twins, Lily and Rose, were inseparable and equally determined to see the world beyond Oklahoma. They eventually moved to Denver, where Lily became a journalist and Rose a photographer, but they too returned home often, bringing stories of their adventures. Through it all, Yates and Adelaide remained the constant center, their love the foundation upon which the family was built. They weathered droughts and economic depressions, celebrated births and mourned deaths, and grew old together with grace and gratitude. Bill passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by the family he had helped raise. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and for years after, Adelaide would see Yates standing at that grave, talking to his old friend as though he could still hear. Sarah and Peter's ranch prospered, and their children grew up speaking both sign language and spoken English as naturally as breathing. Sarah visited often, and the bond between the sisters by marriage remained strong throughout their lives. On their 30th anniversary, Yates and Adelaide sat on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. They were older now, Yates's hair gone silver and Adelaide's brown locks streaked with gray, but their hands still fit together perfectly. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked. "Staying here instead of going back east, living a more cultured life?" Adelaide looked at him in genuine surprise. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, where I have always belonged, with you. Even though I was a rough cowboy with more debts than sense, especially because of that," Adelaide said, laughing. "You were exactly what I needed, Yates. You showed me what it means to build something lasting, to love completely. You gave me a family, a purpose, a home. How could I ever regret that?" Yates lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it with the same tenderness he had shown 30 years ago. "Bravery brought you to me," he said softly. "That is what I told you that first day. I have thought about those words often over the years. You were so brave to come here, to take a chance on a place and people you did not know. And you were brave enough to love me," Adelaide replied. "To build this life with me. We were brave together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, their grandchildren could be heard playing in the yard, Sarah's youngest visiting for the week along with William's 3. The sound of their laughter filled the air, a testament to the legacy of love and courage that Yates and Adelaide had created. In the years that followed, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. Yates gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to William, who had grown into a fine rancher with his own ideas for expanding and improving. Adelaide continued teaching until she was 65, when arthritis in her hands made signing difficult. But even after she retired, students would come to visit, bringing their own children to meet the teacher who had given so much to the community. Yates passed away first at the age of 73 after a short illness. He died in his sleep with Adelaide beside him, holding his hand as she had held it so many times before. His last words to her were, "Thank you for saying yes." Adelaide grieved deeply but without bitterness. They had been given 42 years together, years filled with love and purpose and joy. She lived another 8 years, spending her time with children and grandchildren, tending her garden and writing long letters to Emma and the twins about their father and the life they had built. On a warm spring morning, just after her 80th birthday, Adelaide passed peacefully in her sleep. They buried her beside Yates on the hill overlooking the ranch, under the big sky they had both loved. The entire community turned out for the funeral, testimony to the impact one brave woman had made by simply choosing to go where no one else would. Sarah spoke at the funeral, her hands moving in graceful signs that were translated by her youngest son. "My sister Adelaide came to us when I was lost in silence, and my brother was lost in loneliness. She brought light and love and learning. She taught me to communicate, but more than that, she taught me that being different was not the same as being broken. She taught Yates that he was worthy of love. She taught all of us what it means to live with courage and compassion." Years later, the school Adelaide had helped build was renamed the Adelaide Kincaid School for Learning, and a plaque was placed near the entrance. It read simply, "She came because no one else would go, and in her bravery, she found love and built a legacy." The ranch continued to thrive under William's management, and eventually his children took it over, keeping the Kincaid name strong in Oklahoma Territory. The story of how their grandparents met, of the teacher who came when no one else would and the cowboy who welcomed her bravery, was passed down through generations, becoming part of family lore. The little room where Adelaide had slept that first night was preserved, kept as she had left it, a reminder of beginnings and brave choices. The creek where Yates had first declared his love became a special place for the family, where proposals were made and anniversaries celebrated. Adelaide's teaching materials, carefully preserved, were donated to a museum in Oklahoma City, along with letters she had written documenting her early days at the ranch. Historians studying the settlement of Oklahoma Territory would read her words and marvel at the quiet courage of a young woman who chose duty and compassion over comfort and convention. But perhaps the greatest legacy Adelaide and Yates left was not in buildings or land or even in the children they raised. It was in the example they set of what love could be when built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. They showed that bravery was not just facing physical danger, but also risking your heart, choosing hope when doubt would be easier, building when destruction would be simpler. In the end, Adelaide had come to a rough ranch in Oklahoma Territory because no one else would go, sent to help a girl trapped in silence. She had found not just her purpose but her home, her family, and the great love of her life. And Yates, the rough cowboy with a guarded heart and a desperate hope, had welcomed her bravery and found in her a partner who matched his strength with her own. Their love story was not one of grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had its share of both. It was a love built in daily choices, in patience and perseverance, in the decision to face life's challenges together rather than alone. It was the kind of love that lasted because it was rooted in something deeper than passion or convenience. The prairie winds still blow across the land that Yates and Adelaide called home, carrying with them the whispers of a love story that began with bravery and grew into something beautiful and enduring. And in the hearts of their descendants, the lesson remains clear. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we choose to go where no one else will, and sometimes the greatest love finds us when we are simply trying to do the right thing. The ranch house still stands, renovated and expanded over the years, but retaining the essential character that Yates built into it. On quiet evenings, when the wind is just right, you might imagine you can hear the echo of laughter from long ago, the sound of children playing, the murmur of two voices talking softly on the porch as the sun sets over the endless prairie. This is the story of Adelaide Brennan and Yates Kincaid, of how bravery brought them together, and love kept them that way, of how a mission teacher and a cattle rancher built a life that lasted generations. It is a story worth remembering, worth retelling, a reminder that the most important journeys are the ones we take toward love, and that sometimes, being brave enough to say yes is all it takes to change everything.